A term collector, also called raven collector, term hoarder, collector raven, or hoarder raven, is an individual who uses many labels to describe their gender and orientation, as well as many pronoun sets, hoarding or collecting labels and pronouns that fit them. This identity is a combination of jackdaw hoarder, turkey hoarder, and magpie hoarder, but can also be described as similar to a combination of gender hoarder, kiwi hoarder, and turkey hoarder, but it is not exclusive to individuals whose gender or orientation is fluid or fluctuating. Anyone who has multiple labels to describe their gender and or orientations, and or goes by multiple pronoun sets, may identify as a term collector or raven collector, term hoarder. Raven hoarder and similar hoarder terms are often considered exclusive to those who experience their term collecting as a form of hoarding. An angled arrow ace is an individual that is both ace-spec and arrow-spec, though not necessarily strictly aromantic and asexual, who experiences some form of attraction that they feel is significant enough to warrant a place alongside their arrow-spec and ace-spec identities. This attraction can be a tertiary attraction, sexual attraction, or romantic attraction. The term was intended to be used by those who are not strictly arrow-ace. Nebular-romantic is a romantic orientation on the aromantic spectrum. Much like platoniromantic, those who are nebular-romantic are unable to distinguish the difference between romantic and platonic attraction. But in the case of nebular-romantic individuals, that is due to one's status as neurodivergent. The term nebular-romantic is exclusive to and should only be used by neurodivergent individuals. Bisexual, often shortened to bi, refers to someone who is attracted to two or more genders. It is also sometimes defined as the attraction to genders both the same as and different to one's own. This does not necessarily refer to one only being attracted to men and women, as some think. The bisexual community has an extensive history of challenging the gender binary, and bisexual activists have been outspoken about this fact. Bisexuality encompasses a wide spectrum of attraction. A bisexual may be attracted to any number of genders, from two to all, and may be attracted to any genders in any combination, including non-binary genders. Bisexuals may or may not have a preference and may or may not feel a difference between their attraction to different genders. Bisexuality can be similar to pansexuality and other multisexual identities. The differences between these identities usually comes down to individual preference, particularly where some may feel that different terms communicate their personal experience of attraction with more accuracy. Each bisexual individual may choose to define their attraction slightly differently. Omnisexuality, often shortened to omni, is a multisexual orientation defined as the sexual attraction to all genders, where gender often still plays a role in one's attraction. Some omnisexuals have a gender preference and some do not. Omnisexuality is often compared to pansexuality as they both describe an attraction to all genders, however they can also be distinguished from one another, often being used to indicate a specific and personal experience of one's attraction to all genders. The most commonly cited difference is that omnisexuals factor gender into their attraction to an individual, whereas pansexuals generally do not feel any internal difference between genders, or that any difference felt between genders is irrelevant. It does not factor into their attraction. This is what is meant when pansexuals are referred to as gender blind. Omnisexuals may also feel a difference in attraction between genders. This can manifest in having a preference for a certain gender or genders. It can also feel that attraction to a certain gender feels different to the attraction to another. For example, they may feel like the act of being attracted to a woman feels different than being attracted to a man. Omnisexuals may be attracted to entirely different traits for different genders, or may find certain traits more attractive in some genders than in others. Some individuals may choose to identify with both terms simultaneously, while others may feel that one describes them more accurately than the other. As such, the distinction between pansexual and omnisexual often comes down to individual preference. Omnisexuality is also often compared to bisexuality. Some bisexuals are attracted to all genders, however not all bisexuals are. Some individuals may identify as both bisexual and omnisexual, while others may prefer one term over the other. The choice to use one identity over the other usually comes down to individual preference. For instance, some may prefer to identify as omnisexual, in addition to or instead of bisexual, if they feel it provides a more accurate representation of their orientation, while others may prefer to use a broader term such as bisexual to describe themselves. Transgender, often shortened to trans, is a term referring to an individual whose gender identity does not correspond with their assigned gender at birth, AGAB. Transgender is not a gender identity on its own, rather it is a gender modality. It expresses that there is a difference between one's AGAB and one's gender identity. The opposite of transgender is cisgender. Transgender, also referred to as the transgender umbrella, or the trans umbrella, is most commonly understood as an umbrella term that can refer to a wide range of experiences. The term trans on its own does not solely refer to men who were assigned female at birth and women who were assigned male at birth, though these experiences are representative of a very significant proportion of the trans community. To reflect this, the trans umbrella includes both binary trans individuals, binary trans men and binary trans women, and non-binary trans individuals, though not all non-binary individuals identify as transgender. Binary trans individuals are those who identify fully, solely, and statically as one of the two Western binary genders, men and women. This includes both binary trans women and binary trans men, often referred to simply as trans women and trans men, though it's possible for one to be a non-binary, trans, woman/man. Trans women are women who were not assigned female at birth, most commonly referring to women who were assigned male at birth, AMAB. Trans women may also identify as trans feminine, though not all trans feminine individuals are trans women. Trans men are men who were not assigned male at birth, most commonly referring to men who were assigned female at birth, AFAB. Trans men may also identify as trans masculine, though not all trans masculine individuals are trans men. Any individual whose gender identity is not fully, solely, and/or always aligned with their AGAB may identify as trans. This means that non-binary gender identities are inherently included by the term transgender, and that any non-binary individuals may identify as trans if they wish to. Some non-binary individuals, however, do not identify themselves as trans and do not use the label transgender to describe their experiences/identities. Non-binary individuals may also identify as trans-neutral, trans-feminine, trans-masculine, or a number of other terms depending on an individual's gender identity. Gender hoarder, also known as gender collector and hoard gender, is an identity in which one's gender is fluid or fluctuating, but one can't find just a few terms to describe what their fluctuating gender is, so they hoard gender terms that fit them. Anyone who collects genders may identify as a gender collector. However, gender hoarder, hoard gender and similar hoarder terms are often considered exclusive to those who experience their term collecting as a form of hoarding. This term is similar to Drake fluid, but it is not exclusive to dragonkin or other kin. Additionally, gender vast and jackdaw hoarder could be classed as the stable versions of gender hoarder. Gender vast, or vast gender, is a gender that can be described by many different labels, but is only one gender itself. The gender is hard or impossible to describe with just one term. It is similar to gender hoarder, but it is not fluid. Jackdaw hoarder, or jackdaw collector is a term for someone who collects gender identities. This term is not the same as gender hoarder because while gender hoarders have multiple genders that are fluid or fluctuating, jackdaw hoarders have static gender identities. The reason someone collects gender identities can vary from person to person. Anyone who collects gender identities may identify as a jackdaw collector. Jackdaw hoarder and similar hoarder terms are often considered exclusive to those who experience their term collecting as a form of hoarding. Non-binary, sometimes shortened to NBY or NB, refers to someone whose gender does not fall strictly within the category of the binary genders, male or female, that are used in Western society. Anyone who is not always, solely, 100% male or always, solely, 100% female can be considered non-binary. Some non-binary people may identify with one or both of the binary genders, at least in part, while others are completely unrelated to the binary genders. Non-binary can be a gender identity on its own, or it can be used as an umbrella term for anyone whose gender is something other than male or female. Some individuals may also use the term genderqueer interchangeably with non-binary or something else entirely. Non-binary individuals may call themselves NBs or BORLs, the equivalent of boys or girls, or NBen, the equivalent of men or women. Non-binary individuals may also call themselves an NBan, which is the equivalent of woman or man. Non-binary is included in the umbrella of transgender, although some non-binary individuals choose not to identify as transgender. Some non-binary can be partly connected to or aligned to one or both of the binary genders. For example, a man-aligned non-binary individual, Solarian, may have an experience similar to man or have some connection to manhood, but is not a man or is not fully a man. Non-binary individuals may also be connected to masculinity and or femininity, but they do not necessarily have to be connected to manhood or womanhood. These types of non-binary identities can be called via-binary, ideo-binary, or aligned. Non-binary individuals who are in between or simultaneously experience masculinity and femininity, and or maleness and femaleness can be called androgyne, androgynous, or meso-binary. Other non-binary genders are not connected to the binary genders at all. These genders are not connected to maleness, masculinity, femaleness, femininity, and they are not in between male and female or in between masculine and feminine. However, these genders are also not necessarily a lack of gender or agender. These genders can be called abinary, unaligned, neutral, stellarian, neutral-aligned, epicene, or exobinary. Non-binary individuals who are not female-aligned, feminine-aligned, male-aligned, masculine-aligned, or neutral-aligned are called atrinary, outherine. Many outherine genders are also xenogenders. Since there is no single non-binary look, there is no typical non-binary transition, it depends on one's gender identity and their goals for gender presentation. Some non-binary individuals do not transition and present as the gender assigned to them at birth. Others may attempt to look like the opposite of their assigned gender, as more masculine or feminine. Others will attempt to look as androgynous or gender-neutral as possible. Some non-binary individuals may socially transition but do not medically transition. Other non-binary individuals may take elements of binary transgender transitions. For example, an AFAB, assigned female at birth, non-binary individual may take testosterone, or wear a binder. They may only desire a partial transition in order to look androgynous. Each non-binary individual has a unique relationship with pronouns. If their language has gender-neutral pronouns, such as they/them, they may use those. Some non-binary individuals may go by she/her pronouns or he/him pronouns. Others will go by it/its pronouns, though, this should only be used if someone asks, as otherwise it is dehumanizing. Others still will go by neopronouns. Many non-English speakers will create neopronouns, as their language does not have a gender-neutral singular pronoun like the English they. Additionally, some may go by multiple pronoun sets, and others will go by no pronouns, using just a name in place of where pronouns would be. Vampire gender is typically referred to as an aestheti gender, specifically a mythologender, relating to mythological creatures in terms of gender, a subset of religy gender, relating to religion in terms of gender, and can also be referred to as a noun gender or even a neurogender. It can also be deemed a category of gender, as many subsets of it have been created to suit specific binary genders/different perceptions of a vampiric gender. It may also be a kin gender, although this is not always the case. In terms of aestheti gender, it can be described as dark and mysterious, sometimes even scary or frightening. It may feel ancient and as if it has existed for longer than it was supposed to. It also can feel as if it sucks the life out of other genders, but does not necessarily have to. This can also relate to the deep, spiritual connection to vampirism in connection to and influencing their gender.